Good morning and welcome to Tips for Submitting Compliant but Compelling Tenders. Today we'll be joined by Alison from The Winning Bid, who is going to walk us through what makes a good bid and some tips to make the process that little bit easier. Before we begin, I'd like you all to join our community network on the next slide there, the DLR West Business Association. So over the last 6 months, the community has grown to over 110 members, supporting businesses like yourselves to network and to grow. So please do scan the QR code on the screen and join us today. So during this session, please feel free to drop any questions into the chat box or the Q&A section, and we will put them to Alison at the end of the session. Now, thank you so much, Alison. Over to you.
Hi everyone, good morning. I can't see anybody, but it's nice to be here and presenting. I find lots of people don't like doing tenders. I've been doing them for years now. Lots of people don't like them. So I'd say on a Tuesday after a bank holiday, it's probably even a more difficult time to be looking at them. But hopefully if I can give you a few tips to maybe make things a little bit smoother. So I am a bid management consultant. So I've been working in bids and tenders and proposals and whatever else we call them, ITTs, RFTs, PQQs, for more than 15 years now. I started off in the pharmaceutical industry and then in about 2012 moved in to a support services company. And then about 8 years ago, I set up on my own, just as a consultant. So I've worked with about 20, 25 different companies. And what I do is I help them produce, it's generally public sector. I still do a little bit of private sector stuff. So I work with companies to produce and submit winning bids, ideally. So I've worked on lots of different industries, the events industry, civils, electrical, training, lots of different things. And I've done, so in addition to helping companies with bids, I've also helped them implement a process or implement a content library. So other stuff to have in place to support their bid function. And again, like I've worked with lots of different companies, from just small SMEs to big multinational firms. So what we're gonna look at today is what can we do to make a really good tender submission. The public sector in Ireland is worth millions and millions of euro every year. And bid for lots of companies, bidding into the public sector is absolutely critical to company growth. So what we wanted to look at is how can you put together a really good submission that meets the client's needs, that differentiates you from the competition, that is compliant, and how do you get there? Because it can be pretty tricky coming from first downloading the documents on e-tenders to submitting something really good isn't necessarily a smooth process. So what we're going to look at is starting from getting the documents and using e-tenders, to deciding whether or not you really should bid for something, to planning out the response and then pulling it all together. And then what we'll also do is just some tips on reviewing and also on getting feedback from tenders. But again, as Clara was saying, if you have any questions at all, please just pop them up into the chat box and we can have a look at them as we go along. Okay. So the first place to start with public tendering is e-tenders. I'm sure you all know this already. I'm not going to go into e-tenders too much. I think that would need a whole other training session of its own. But what I would say is just make sure that there's a few things that you're hitting with e-tenders. So in e-tenders, you can set up a company profile. So just make sure that that's in there, all the right company information is in there. There's a function to set up email alerts. So when you go in, you can tick which areas you're interested in, and then you'll get daily email alerts listing out everything relevant. I have mine set up so that I get everything. So any new tender that appears overnight, I get an email each morning listing everything out. An ESPD, so this is a European single procurement document. So the whole purpose of an ESPD is that you can have certain information set up ready to go, and then a client or a tender, a contracting authority can request this so that they, when they're looking at their, when they're requesting information, they will say, right, if you give us an ESPD, then there's certain stuff you don't need to give us at this stage. So it can be general company information, it can be a tax information, that kind of stuff. But there's on e-tenders, there's a section where you can go to set the ESPD up. So I strongly recommend doing that. So then it's ready to go if you're requested one with a submission. Then for any new tenders that you're interested in, make sure you go in when you see the tender and e-tenders, make sure that you do express your interest. That's how you can access the documents and also get any updates to the contract documents. So if they issue any new documents, if they revise any of the tender documents during the tender process, that's how you'll find out about them, through the messaging function on e-tenders. And then obviously the tender submission section of e-tenders is where you submit your tender. Again, like I say, that was just a very brief overview of e-tenders. I think it's not the easiest system to use. I think it needs a whole training session in itself. Okay, so this here is, if you click into a new tender in e-tenders, this is what you'll see. This will list out all of the key information, and it's this area here over on the right hand side. So I've already expressed my interest in this tender. So this is where you would go. There would normally be a section to express interest, but you can see here you've got the core information, which is this stuff that you can see, the CFT documents, the call for tender documents, so all of the documents that you need to review to find out all the information you need. Tender, so that's where you're going when it's time to submit a tender. You can withdraw your expression of interest if you need to, specify alerts, messaging, and automated notification. So it's the messaging, tender, and the CFT documents that you're going to be most interested in. But it just makes sure that you do review this section thoroughly. This is where you'll find information on timelines or what the deadline is for queries. All that kind of really important stuff will be here in this section of e-tenders. Okay, so just a couple of key things with e-tenders. Check the dates. And I would also cross-check the dates on e-tenders versus the dates that are in the tender documents. There'll sometimes be a mismatch between them. E-tenders is normally the one that's correct, but if you do see a mismatch, I would make sure that that's clarified. You use the messaging function in e-tenders for any clarifications, unless the tender documents specifically tell you to go to a certain person. Always use the messaging function. Make sure your ESPD is up to date and is in there in the right place. On e-tenders, there are some tutorial videos that will help you actually show you exactly what you need to do to submit a tender. So it's probably worth, if you're using e-tenders a lot, which if you're doing a lot of public sector tenders, you will be, it's probably worth having a look at some of those. Like I said, it's not the easiest system to use. I'm sure people have plenty of issues with it, but it's probably worth having a look at some of those tutorials. And then my final thing for e-tenders, my final tip, just give yourself plenty of time. It is a tricky system to use. Submitting isn't necessarily the most straightforward thing. So do give yourself plenty of time to submit a tender. I worked with a couple of companies, it's probably about 5 or 6 years ago now, and they were submitting a joint venture bid together. One of them was quite a big company, and they were relying on the smaller company for experience to meet the experience criteria in the tender, and the smaller company were reliant on the bigger company to meet the turnover requirements. So they joined up and formed a joint venture. It was for a big enough tender with Dublin City Council, and especially for the smaller company, it was worth a lot. So they teamed up and they submitted a prequal together as a joint venture, and that went well. And then the tender came out. We all worked really hard on what we thought was a really good submission. Then the commercial director in the bigger company, he was submitting it through the e-tenders, and he had it all uploaded, and I think it's due at 12 o'clock, and he got distracted at 5 to 12 and didn't hit the submit button. So they weren't able to submit their tender, and they were thrown out of the process, and it caused huge problems. They tried going down a solicitor route to see if they could get back in there, but it was too late, and would have been a great opportunity that they had a really good chance of winning, but they were thrown out because they missed the deadline. So just be careful with e-tenders. Okay. So when you have a new tender, when a new tender lands in, it's really important to understand whether it is the right company, whether it is the right bid for your company. Okay. So based on my own experience from working with lots of different companies, I think sometimes companies can rush into bidding, so they can get a new tender through e-tenders or however else they might get it, and they'll throw themselves into it straight away. But before you do that, I would suggest taking a step back and just thinking about a few different questions to make sure that it is the right thing for your company before you invest time and resources into producing a bid. Ask yourself, do you actually really want it? So can you make money from it? Is it within your target sector? Is it in the right region? Is it exactly the type of thing that you want? Can you win it? So can you meet all the boxes? So if I have a really good review of the documents, can you meet all of the selection criteria? Can you provide the evidence that they're looking for? Can you provide the right solution? Can you give them the technical or operational insight that they need? Are you better than the competition? Can you beat them? Do you know who your competitors are? Can you get the price right? This is really important, obviously. Can you get the pricing structure right so that you have a decent enough chance of winning? Then, okay, so if you do know you want it and you think you can win it, but can you deliver it? So if you won it and if you had to start the job in the morning, can you do it? Can you meet the timelines? Do you have the resources? Have you got the right cash flow? Can you meet all of the timeframes? Can you actually deliver the project? If it's not for you, that's fine. But just explain that clearly. So you can do it either through e-tenders, or if you have your own contact within the contracting authority, just explain why and explain it well. Just be clear with them so that you're not closing the door on other opportunities. This is just really important. Yet, like I said, you don't want to waste any time. So you also don't want to start a bid process and then halfway through realize actually we can't meet these criteria. We're not in with a chance of winning this. So I would just urge you to have a really thorough review of the documents. I sometimes find in some of the organizations where I work, like a few people might read the documents, but not everybody will. And I understand they can be tricky documents to read, but you do really need to go through them in detail to just pull out all the key bits and then just ask yourselves those 3 questions. Do you want it? Can you win it? And can you deliver it? Okay. So I think having a good bid process is really important, but I think the sort of level of the process can vary depending on the company and the size of the company. If you're just a very small SME with 1 or 2 people working on tenders and pulling them together, then you don't necessarily need to have a formal process. I think for some of the bigger companies where I've worked, it's really important. You have lots of people feeding into a process. It's really important to know exactly what you're expecting from people throughout the process, when you're going to need their input, what exactly you need from them. So I've kind of split this into 4 different areas of a bid process. So we're going from receipt of the documents through e-tenders up to finalising the bid and then taking some lessons learned from the bid. So phase 1, planning and initiation. So review of the documents. So that is your first point, obviously. Then you're going to go through your no bid process. So asking yourself those 3 questions. If you decide that you are bidding, who's involved? Who is the team? Then you want to agree who's doing what. So who's going to do the pricing? Who is going to answer the questions on experience? Who's going to provide the reference projects? Who's going to work on the CVs? Who's going to look at the mobilization plan or whatever else it is that you need? I would just be very clear on what you want people to provide upfront, and give people plenty of time, give yourself plenty of time to pull everything together. So then you go into your content development stage. So this is where you're developing your operational or technical content for the main RFT response. So again, you might need a mobilization plan, you might need a methodology, you might need a full program of works, you might need method statements, you might need RAMs. So all of that stuff, just make sure it's very clear what you want from people. Give them enough time to provide it. The commercial solution is going to be agreed during this as well. So again, making sure that the pricing and the margins are what you want them to be and that they're competitive. And then once you've given people a timeline, you're going to pull all the information together so that it's in a nice document that somebody can review. So really important in phase 3 for the production and submission that there's a decent review. You need a review that's quite detailed and make sure that the questions have all been answered, that your company is putting its best foot forward. But you also want somebody who can kind of look at it from a more high level, kind of look at it from the client's perspective and see, is it coming across why you should win? Is it clear why you're the best possible solution for this project? Then if you have a sign-off process, so you might need an MD to sign off on the pricing or the overall submission, and then you're going to submit through e-tenders, giving plenty of time to do so. And then phase 4 is really important. So this is like following up on what you've submitted. So if you have a content library, so somewhere where you can store all of the stuff that you need for a submission. So it might be CVs, it might be case studies, methodologies, samples of stuff. So take whatever you can from what you've just submitted. And I try and do that within a few days of submitting. Just take what you need that you know is good content and put it somewhere, whichever kind of system you're using for your content library. Do it quickly or you'll forget about it and you'll come to the next tender 2 months later and you'll be wondering, where did I put that really good case study, or what bid did I use that person's CV for? So do that quite quickly. And then you'll get your client decision. Now, I really recommend, regardless of whether or not you've won, try and get feedback from the client. So there'll be generally in public sector contracts, there'll be a 14-day standstill period. So you can't really do much then. But I would, even if you've won, ask them, why did you win? What was good about your bid that was better than the competition? If you haven't won, if you came third in the process, what did your bid lack that somebody else was able to deliver on? Where were you with the pricing? How far off were you? And again, just so that you can, there's nothing more useful than feedback and review from the client's perspective, so that you know next time around how you can tailor your submission a little bit better to increase your chance of winning. Again, like I say, this with the process stuff, it depends on the company, how kind of rigid you need to be with all of this. With bigger companies, I'd say I'd be mapping out a full process, making sure that anybody who provides input into a bid, that they know exactly what their roles should be, just for clarity, and to try and just overall have a smoother run from receipt of documents to submission. Okay, so with a decent process then, so you've got clear roles and responsibilities, everybody knows what they're doing. There's governance, you might have somebody overseeing the whole process. There'll be consistency. So if everybody knows what they're doing, and if you, as the bid manager, as maybe a very small part of your overall job, but as a bid manager, you can make sure that there's just a bit of consistency. All of this then will lead to a better quality bid, which will increase your chance of success. And then if you submit a decent proposal or a good tender, then you've more of a chance of winning and you're going to have a happier client. Okay, so with any kind of tender, it's really important to try and get across why your company is the best possible company to do this project. So it was a good few years ago now, in a company where I worked, we did a big exercise in trying to get feedback from clients. So we went to about maybe 20 different clients that we had submitted a bid to over the previous 12 months. And we gave them a questionnaire and we asked them lots of different questions about how our bid had been seen by them. And one of the procurement people who came back to us said that Attenda is a story of how the supplier will deliver the job. Don't make the story boring. So from a procurement perspective, you want the person reading your proposal or your RFT response to be interested and to be engaged. With these public sector bids, there can be a lot of administrative detail and you've got to be compliant, and some of it can be pretty boring, but what you want to do is try and pull out why your company is best placed to deliver the job, and just try to just elevate your documents so that they're not too boring, that they're easy to read, they're engaging, and that somebody in procurement or whoever's reviewing the document can do so easily, and it comes across really clearly to them why you should win. So with public sector, compliance is hugely important. You have to tick the boxes. So I would strongly advise reading the documents multiple times. There can be lots of with public sector stuff, little hidden nuggets in there somewhere that you need to make sure you're doing. So you've got to make sure you're getting the right document signed, you're providing the right insurance details, the right company information, the right tax details, all of that kind of stuff. But what you want to be looking at is, with most public tenders, there'll be evaluation criteria. And there might be some mandatory pass-fail requirements, and then there might be selection and award criteria, which are weighted. And overall, then they feed into the overall qualitative score of your tender, and then they are tied in with the quantitative score from the pricing. So just make sure that you're crystal clear on those requirements and that you can tick the boxes. Especially with some tenders, they'll give you, I think they call them selection criteria first, and this might be, can you provide 3 projects from the past 5 years that meet these certain criteria? If you can't do that, then you really need to look again to see whether you should be bidding. If you can't meet these selection criteria, they can refuse to review anything else that you submit. When they're reviewing, are ticking boxes. So you just need to make sure that you have all those boxes ticked, and then when they see your submission, it's very clear to them that you can meet the requirements, that you've got the pass-fail stuff in place. It could be an ISO accreditation. It could be you might need ISO 45001 for health and safety. So if you don't have that, and that's a requirement, do consider whether you should be submitting, but also maybe you could query that with them. You might not think that you do need a 45001 certification. So maybe go back during the queries phase, go back to them and say, do we really need this? Or if we're looking at getting that certification, is that okay for now? I would just try and, if you think you can't meet requirements, try and query them. And if you definitely can't, then you need to look back whether you really should be bidding. Then evidence. So any evidence that you're required to provide, make sure you provide it. And make sure it's clear where you've put it. Don't say, yep, we've got our ISO cert, and not provide it. You want it to be as easy as possible for them to read. They could be reading 5 or 6 30-page documents. Make sure it's easy for them. If you're confused on anything, if there's any requirements that you think don't make sense, if some of their scoring doesn't quite make sense, you ask. Use the clarifications period in the messaging function in eTenders and ask them what. Just get as much clarity as you can. That's what they're there for. They're there to answer the questions. Again, like I just already said, make sure that your compliance is clear. So give them a really clear table of contents. If you're including a lot of appendices, which for some of the big public tenders you will be, and make sure that they're all clearly numbered and they can find whatever they need. And then meet the deadline. Again, basic, really basic. But again, with the queries, make sure you meet the queries deadline. Make sure you've done a thorough enough review of all of the documents so that you can meet their queries deadline, and then you can pull everything together and meet their final submission deadline. And then just one kind of tip is I would, wherever you can, whichever content you're giving them, try and tie back to their requirements. Again, it'll just make it a little bit more client focused. It'll make it a bit more interesting for them and give you a higher chance of winning if they can easily see why you're the right company to do the job. Okay. So a critical thing for any submission is showing that you understand what they want. Why have they put this tender out? Sometimes it might just be that it's up for renewal. They've had another company doing it for 3 or 4 years. It's time to renew. But what you want to try and do, even before the tender comes out, if you have relationships in place with the contracting authority or with the key decision makers, try and get as much information as you can about the tender before it comes out. Ideally, you want to try and be influencing the tender before it comes out. So I'm working on a bit at the minute for an electrical company to provide electrical maintenance services in a hospital. So they've been doing this for years. So they knew that it was coming out. They knew the hospital want them to keep doing it. So they were asked to kind of, provide what they thought would be useful in terms of asking for the number of reference projects or the CVs and that kind of thing. So the more you know about the client and what they're trying to do with this procurement, the better. Again, now with public sector stuff, that can be trickier. The first you hear about a new tender might be when it comes up on your email alerts from e-tenders. But just where the opportunity arises, do try and get as much as you can from the client beforehand. So once a tender lands, then what are their requirements? So don't just take this from the documents. Use your own intel from the sector and from the market. What do you know about what they're looking for? Like, what's working for them now? Is something not working? Is the incumbent doing a good job? If not, what can you do to try and exploit that? What can you give the client? How can you give them comfort that you can deliver the job? And then across your tender, just be consistent. So I'm going to talk a bit more in a minute about win themes, which is basically picking a few areas from your company that you think will make you the winning tenderer. So this might be your experience. It might be the expertise of your team. It might be that you've got the technical accreditations in place. So pick a couple of themes. Pick maybe 3 themes per tender and stick to them and try and weave them throughout your whole submission. Weave them into your content plan and then look back at the client's scoring system so that you are consistently trying to meet their needs. So the competition. So understanding who the competition is really important for how you can position yourself really well and produce a good submission. So you will likely know a lot of this already, but it's just important to consider when you're developing your content. So who is the competition? What are their strengths and weaknesses? What can they do or not do that your company can do? And how can you mitigate those weaknesses? So you might know that one of your competitors, maybe they're not as strong on health and safety, and that's a really important requirement for the client in this time. So you can draw on your own health and safety experience and really weave that in throughout your document. If the competition is better than you, what gaps do you need to fill? Is there something that you need to do or do better for this submission that you need to try and that the contracting authority, they might know that you're not as strong as a competitor. So what can you do? And then how can you emphasize your own strengths? So how can you really hammer home that you've got the experience, that you've got the right people, that you've got all the technical and the operational, and you can do this easily? How can you emphasize that? So they're just some questions just to think about in the qualitative piece of your tender submission. Okay, so I am just going to briefly look at a tender from eTenders. So I pulled this off eTenders last Monday. I don't know anything about this tender. I'm not involved in it. I'm not doing the tender. So it was more just to give you an idea of kind of where to start with having a look at the documents and then producing a plan for how you're going to answer everything properly. So these 3 documents. So the main, I think these were the 3 main documents. So you know yourself when you're reviewing a tender. So the contract, which is over here on the left-hand side, the service agreement, the actual ITT or RFT document, and then this is a tender response document. So I'm just going to flick to my other screen for a sec so you can see. So the RFT document is where you're going to get your kind of critical information. So I highlighted some of the really important stuff here. So the basic information, there's always a lot of very wordy text in these kind of documents. I've just pulled out some of the key stuff. So it's telling us here it's a 3-year contract with a possible 2 12-month extensions. It's worth about 400 grand. And then this kind of stuff, again, you need to read through it, but it's the selection criteria that I want to look at in here with you guys today. Okay, so here, a compliant tender, section 2.2, they're telling us that we need to do an ESPD. So this is where you'd need to be going to eTenders and making sure that your ESPD is complete on eTenders and that they'll be able to access it. Then if we scroll down, okay, so again, there's something here. So all tenders must retain a scanned signed copy of the tender's statement as in Appendix 3. They saying, if possible, please use blue ink. So these just kind of small things that will make you compliant. They're saying here that you have to use eTenders to submit. Deadline is 12 o'clock on Friday, the 1st of May. A soft copy must be in PDF. Queries up until the 17th of April. So these are just kind of the key things that I've pulled out from a review of this main document. So all tenders must complete the pricing schedule. And then I'm gonna go, okay, so insurance. So they've listed here what the insurance requirements are. Okay, so then we're into the selection and award criteria. So obviously it's critical here. So they're saying that you basically need to submit an ESPD to confirm that you can meet these criteria. So that you have an Irish tax clearance cert, that you're compliant with social security and revenue obligations, you've got insurance evidence, and that you have a minimum turnover of 50 grand. Then, as well as that, you need to be able to provide 2 references for similar jobs. So this is for training. It's for training in the energy sector. So you need 2 comparable references for design, development, delivery of similar training courses. And then the relevant quality assurance procedures in place. Okay, so that's just tick the box stuff. Before we move on to the award criteria, that's all just selection criteria. If you can't meet those, you really need to consider whether you should be tendering or not. Then we go into the award criteria. So this is weighted. So they're giving us these sections. So there's a resourcing plan, method and approach, quality of proposed content, green and social criteria, and operational capacity and pricing. So they've split out there what each of those is worth. So cost is 15%. The rest of the qualitative stuff is 85%. So that's very heavily weighted towards qualitative. And that's probably one of the highest I've seen in terms of that, actually. 85% to be pretty high. And then what I'm looking for now is this. So Appendix 1, requirements and specifications. So a lot of public tender documents would have this Appendix 1 where they detail what they're actually looking for and what they really want. So they're giving here an overview of themselves. It's Wind Energy Ireland, their mission, vision, values, And the next page, this is what we're really interested in. So this is where they're spelling out exactly what they want. So again, this needs a really thorough review to see if you can actually meet these criteria. So they've given a course overview, and then they've given what the training outcomes should be. Okay, so, and they're just saying here, so again, it's 3 cohorts of delivery. Okay, so those are the, sorry, then we go into the pricing schedule. But just to go back to this, I would be recommending that everything that you include in your qualitative response ties back as much as you can to this Appendix 1 and their requirements and specifications. Now, what I'm going to do now is just flick to their tender response document. So not all contracting authorities or public tender bodies will give you a tender response document. Lots of them do. It can make life easier, I think, sometimes. So they've given this tender response document. And again, they've given a couple of instructions about what you need to provide. So general company information, this is all very standard stuff. They want an overview of the organisation, that's all fine. Then we go into the selection criteria, which is what they've already explained in the RFT. But here, so they are asking for turnover and tax clearance and insurances. And then here they're asking for details of similar contracts. Okay, so this, when they're asking for the reference projects, I think this is really important. Even though this is just a pass-fail, you can give them the basic information, but what you really want to do here is really hammer home your experience on how is it relevant to this particular new contract. How can you use your team and your past experience to deliver this? So I'd really be trying to make these as detailed as you can, because it's a great place to easily just showcase what you can do. So they're asking for 3 contracts, I think. Then quality management. So do you have a third-party certified system? If not, that's okay. You can just provide some details of how you do manage quality. And then we're into the more administrative stuff. So a tender statement, and then a couple of forms that need to be signed. So again, just from a compliance point of view, make sure that you are doing all of those things and ticking the boxes. Now, there's something with this which I think is a little bit confusing, is that they have given these award criteria. There's no mention of the award criteria in this tender response document, which is, I'd say, possibly an oversight on their part. So I would query that. So I'd say, look, you said you want these, is it 5 or 6 different areas covered? You want a resourcing plan and methodology, but there's no mention of that in the tender response document. So I would just query that. I'd say, is it okay for tenderers to provide their own document that covers the award criteria, just so that you're clear on what they want? I would say what's happened here is they've taken a tender response document from a previous tender. But again, like, you'll see that there's going to be discrepancies. If you look back at the tender response document, they're looking for turnover from 2020, 2021 and 2022 rather than say 25, 24, 23. But with the public sector tendering, you do get those kind of discrepancies, but query them. That's what they're there for. They're there to be queried. So based on those documents, I would be putting together something like this to use as a bid plan. So I've pulled out all of the main requirements and criteria that you need to complete, what the weighting is. So are they just pass fail, or are they weighted? So a resourcing plan is, say, 15%. Who owns it? So within your own company, who's going to be responsible for making sure that you've got a current tax clearance set, or who they've got it from the revenue website? Does the owner need input from anybody else? And then are there any particular notes or anything? So I've just put a couple of things here in red that if I was working on this tender, I'd be querying, because they say that you can just provide your ESPD to say that you can meet the insurance, but then in the tender response document, they actually want evidence of your insurance. So just something to query. And then a status box over here, so you can just status something. It's done, ready to go, if it's delayed, or if it's still in progress. So we've got our selection criteria here. So these are all pass fail. Then we're going into award criteria, resourcing plan, method and approach, quality, proposed contact, etc. Your pricing, and then the 2 documents that you need to complete and sign. And again, I just put a couple of notes that this needs to be on company letterhead. Appendix 4, this is a standard document, a public tender. It needs to be signed by a solicitor or commission first. And then you've got your ESPD, and then you've got your separate tender response document. And again, just a few notes on font sizes and that kind of thing. So just all of the key stuff that you need to be hitting is here in one place in an Excel where your whole team can access it and they can use it as a starting point. I think that's really important to just do that little plan. And I think it just makes it a bit easier for yourself then in terms of tracking everything and making sure it's all where it should be. Okay, so back to my PowerPoint then. Okay, so for your content, so when I talk about the content now, I'm talking about this award criteria. So we've got the headings that they gave us, which was quality approach and methodology. So I touched on win themes a little bit earlier. So again, so think why should you win? Think about that with the other people who are involved as well. So it might be a very common one would be your own experience. So say for this one, this is about training. So you have done some recent training. You've delivered a very similar training course that got really good feedback from the trainees. So you can talk about that and you can weave that in. Your technical knowledge, your trainers might be the best in the business. They might be influencing policy overall, or their own experience can be really, really strong. So then you want to plan out what you're going to include for each of these headings in the award criteria. So decide what your main headings are going to be and what your subheading is going to be, and keep tying it back to the RFT or the ITT. Keep tying it back to this Appendix 1 requirements and specifications. And again, just be as clear as you possibly can. I think what happens a lot is people try and throw lots of content in, or they want to try and answer a different question because they want to showcase something. Just my last point is just answer the question. Keep it simple. Don't try and answer a different question just because you've got something you want to say. Answer the question that they're asking and answer it fully. Don't give them any kind of excuse to mark you down. Just keep looking at the questions and just keep it focused and keep it simple. So this is something that you could use as a starting point for your content. So their first award criteria there was a resourcing plan. So what win themes can you factor in here? Okay, so for your resourcing plan, then you're going to be looking at who's involved. So the experience of your team here is huge, and as is your experience with similar projects. How did you resource them? How did they, how were they strongly resourced so that you could have everything done, ready on time, the training went well, and it was all delivered easily? So in your outline then, the key headings, I would be including an org chart of the team, the resources that you're going to appoint, what their role will be, how they'll fit into the wider team. I'd include some bios here of the key people. So if you've got, say, a project manager and a trainer and maybe administrative support or something like that, I'd include bios for maybe 3 people. And then I'd be looking to explain what their availability is, that they can be ready to go from the 1st of June, and then what your overall timelines for the project are. So when do you think you'll have a draft? When will you meet them? When will you have a draft ready? When are you aiming to deliver the training? Then graphics, if you ideally use as many graphics as you can. So you're going to want an org chart in here, maybe some photos of the team members, maybe a program. And then I'd be looking at the length of that. So based on what you want to include, I'd say you'd be looking at 3 pages, maybe 4 pages at the most for that section. Then you can go on to your next one. So method and approach. And again, like this RFT, it's quite vague sometimes. A contracting authority might give you a heading of method and approach, and then they could give you 4 or 5 bullets of what they want covered. They haven't here, they've kept it vague. So again, so you can use that to your advantage. You can then you kind of say, right, well, how can we make this work for us? So method and approach. So what's your recent experience? How is your recent experience relevant? How can you use that to make this a smooth and easy training process? Your technical expertise can be demonstrated through this as well. So I would say there'd be a few questions to answer yourself then within method and approach. What is your method? Who's involved? When are they going to be involved? What kind of meetings will you have? Will you have meetings with the client? How often should they be? You're going to have internal meetings. And then what about review? How do you get your training content ready? And then post-training, what's the review process? How do you know that the trainers have been well trained and that they were happy with it? A program of works might be your graphic for here. And again, like you'd probably want to be, I think this question was worth about 15%. So you'd want to be like a kind of meaty enough response here. So I'd be looking at maybe 5 pages. One other thing, this is important, tie back to the percentage weighting, like check back to see that the level of effort that you're putting in ties in with what they're looking for. So they might have a section for team, and that's about 25%. So you need to be putting in a lot of time making sure that your CVs are really, really strong. Okay. So once you know what you want to say, these are just a few tips on here on how to make your bid really persuasive. So you want to be looking at personal differentiation. So your company's expertise, how you can meet the industry standards. Are you informing any of the standards? What kind of knowledge do you have in-house that's better than the competition? And why you? So just describing what you're going to do isn't going to make you win. They need to see the benefits to your experience and your expertise. They need to see exactly how you can use that experience for their own benefit. Now, for each paragraph that you write, I think it's nice to say, who cares? So if you're writing about something, just look back and think, does anybody really care? Well, are they really going to want to read this? Like for some of the compliancy type stuff, the tick the box stuff, like you have to do it. But just in the award criteria, just really think, like, is this interesting? Are they actually going to want to know about this? Like I said, like don't answer a question based on what you want to put in the question. Answer based on what they want to see. Think about them. And so use their language. So take the wording and stuff that they've used in their own documents and mirror that kind of language wherever you can throughout your own response. Then write kind of conversationally. Don't make it very, very formal. So just imagine that you're in the room with them and you want your answer. You want it to just be warm and engaging and easy. And then evidence. So we've mentioned this already in terms of some of the pass-fail criteria, but try and not throw out vague claims that you're the best marketing agency in Ireland. Like give them really specific stuff, give them data, give them case studies and examples, because it will just build trust. Don't kind of just throw out vague stuff. Just keep it all nice and specific and simple that you can back up as well. Okay, so it's easy in a submission to just write it about yourself, and company X can do this, company X can do this, we can do this, we can do this, and we can do this. But the contracting authority and the procurement people, they're reading it for themselves. They have a problem to solve with this tender. So they want to know how exactly are you going to make things easy for them. So this is just an example of how you can tweak some of your writing. So you could say, we will deliver a robust mobilization process aligned to best practice and supported by our experienced team. That's a bit vague and it doesn't really tell them exactly what you're going to do. But you could just tweak this slightly. You could say the client will benefit from a structured mobilization process that reduces implementation risk, maintains service continuity, which will be really important for any contract, so that users experience a seamless transition. So that you show that you're focusing on them, you're focusing on their end client. So it's the same solution, but it's more about what the outcome is going to be and how it's going to work well for them. Okay. So the buyer, they see when they open a document, before they read it, they see it. They see things that jump out at them, and they look at the design of a document. So where you can, and in public sector, you won't be able to do this all the time. They might have a tender response document that's really stringent, but wherever you can, create a visual identity for your whole bid. So use your own company colours, make sure that your graphics tie in with the messaging you want for your own company. If they've implemented restrictions, follow them. Don't deviate at all. Just stick to them. And then structure your document so that it's very readable. So you want lots of headings, lots of subheadings. You want lots of white space. Like a one page full of just really dense writing can be really hard to read. Like I would find that hard to read. Wherever you can, use pictures and graphics. So processes and workflows and your own experience, photos, really important. Use them wherever you can. Reviewing. So you really need a good review. Every submission needs a decent review. So you need to make sure that you're building in time. For myself, I try and have a document ready for my own clients to review maybe a week before it's due, where possible. And then it's more, you want to make sure that whoever reviews you want them to be able to tell you if it's clear why you should win. That would be the main reason. Like the kind of the smaller stuff, the grammar, the spelling, you can pick some of that up yourself with tools in Microsoft Word. But you want somebody reviewing from the client's perspective to see if you do have a compelling case. And then one thing to just be aware of, if you've got lots of contributors to a bid, you don't want the client to be able to see that. You want it to be in one voice. So when you're reviewing and tweaking and editing towards the end, just something to just be aware of, that it all sounds like one person has written it. Okay. Just conscious of time, where I've been talking too much. So I'll briefly touch on, there is lots of AI. There's lots of AI talk at the minute. There's some huge benefits to using AI in bidding. You've less time to write yourself. You can free up that time to exercise judgment, to review and to refine, to analyze the client's requirements. And you can actually have more time to look at the potential risk of bidding and potential risk of your own company winning the work. But what I would say is just be careful. So the likes of ChatGPT, they don't know your business, and your competition could be using the exact same tools. You could say, if we'd use that method and approach question, if we had put into ChatGPT, give me a methodology for training in the wind energy sector, your competition could take exactly the same thing. And especially with ChatGPT, it's really easy to tell if somebody has used it. It's always got the one introductory line and then 3 or 4 bullet points. Just use, whoever's reading wants to know that you've invested the time and they want it to be human. They'll know, like, it's very clear if something has been written by AI and you want to use your own authentic company's voice. So just be careful. A few tools that are useful. There's something called Deep RFP. Now you have to pay for that, but you can get a free trial of it, and they can review a draft submission, and they'll kind of tell you if you're compliant, or if it's a really good, they'll give you kind of like 3 different levels of like good response, ticks the boxes, up to like a really good response, and they can give you like little tips of how to elevate it. I did find, I've used that before and found it good. There's something called Platform that someone was telling me. I haven't used this myself, but it can be used to simplify text, and it can pull out acronyms and all that kind of thing. And then again, like ChatGPT, it can be used as a starting point. Like say if you need to write a bio or a methodology, but do just use it as a starting point and make sure that you're tweaking it so that it, it's authentic and it sounds like it's coming from your company. I'll fly through this. So that I mentioned this earlier, how to improve overall is getting feedback. So if you can get formal feedback from a client, get it. Sometimes clients will, when the tender process is complete, and they've made the award, sometimes they'll give really detailed feedback, which can be really useful. But informal feedback can be just as good. So if you know somebody at the contracting authority, after the standstill period and after the award process is complete, ask them. Just try and get a little bit of information. Ask them some good questions just to try and get a little bit of insight on what you can do better. And then you can factor that into any future bids. So overall then, if I was going to give some major advice, read the documents multiple times, comply with any instructions that they're giving, make sure that you can tick those boxes, make a plan and then stick to it, map it out in that kind of Excel format, manage your time properly. So keep an eye on time frames for clarifications, make sure, you know, if the timeline changes, make sure you factor that in. Think about the competition. How can you exploit your own strengths and exploit their weaknesses? Identify win themes so that you can weave them in throughout your document. Target your effort so that you're not wasting time on something that's worth a minimal amount of marks within the award criteria. Give evidence wherever you can and make the documents easy to read and review it. Give it a really good review before it's submitted. That was a lot to get through in a short space of time. But like I say, I really enjoy helping companies with bids. So if you do need anything, if you want me to have a look at a future tender, feel free. My contact details are there. And yeah, I hope some of that was useful.
Thank you so much, Alison. I think something as simple as having that filing process in place and to keep all your documentation up to date is a really good starting point as a business anyway. I think that's really good to have everyone access it at the same time, make sure everything's up to date. So many great takeaways. We have a few questions in, so we might maybe just have time for one or two before we finish up. So one of the questions is, how can a smaller business, because many of the members listening today are small to medium-sized businesses, compete against the larger, more established ones? And I guess in that space as well, against bigger brands that maybe have a reputation that precedes them.
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think being a smaller company is an advantage in itself, because you'll have more time to focus on the client and the contracting authority. So you still need to meet certain criteria. So again, it's about emphasizing, picking the things about your company and then emphasizing them. So whether you're competing against a really big company or not, if you can meet the criteria, great, and just emphasize your own experience. With a smaller company, the team might be more important because there'll be a smaller team. So that's good for the client. They'll be dealing with the same people consistently. You'll have more time to spend with them potentially. So I would be really bigging up the people and the specific individual experience that you have.
Right. What do you think? There's another question here. How can you check who the incumbent is and if the tender is written specifically for them to win?
Yeah, good question. I don't know if there's you could actually. So through e-tenders, for any previously completed tender processes, there's, if you go to the original e-tenders tender, you'd have to dig it out. It might be from a couple of years ago. I think through there's a link to the European TED journal, and I think sometimes you can find out the incumbent from that. I can send something through to Clara, if you can share it, Clara, of how you can find that out. And then whether or not it's been written for the incumbent, I don't know how you'd find that out. Some of my own clients, I know they can look at a document and say, this has been written for company Z. I know it. So yeah, I don't know. Finding out if it's been written for the incumbent, it would be tricky. But I can explain how you can find out who the incumbent is.
Okay, maybe just one last question before we move on. So for businesses new to tendering, what are the things they should focus on to increase their chance of winning?
Okay, so being compliant, making sure that you're ticking the boxes, and then I think just, again, like pulling out why you versus somebody else. And exploiting the competition and saying, like, what can you bring that somebody else can't? And then really using some of the stuff that we talked about with the win themes and planning your content. like if you a well planned out document that meets the criteria and where you know that you can do a good job, like it, it should write itself. So it's just using the talent within your own company and the experience you've got and the expertise and drawing on that, draw on the other people in the company. I think especially with SMEs, you might have one person who gets lumbered with doing all of the tenders, which can be pretty painful, I'd say, but use the other people within the company, draw on their experience, and really try and work as a team to pull everything you can to produce a good response.
Thank you so much, Alison. I'm conscious now it's 11 o'clock. Thank you all so much for joining us today. If there's something that we didn't touch on, or if you have any further questions, please do reach out to us afterwards. We'll be sending on the recording, the slides, and any other information that you might need from us. Thank you so much, Alison.
Thank you.